save you. Go.
Thank you very much. What a good-looking crowd. It's so great to be here. We always love coming back to the Granite State, but I'm not going to lie to you. It's cold. You know, I've got southern skin, and it's thin. And I remember, because we were campaigning last winter in the Granite State, and I'm like, oh, man, this is going to hurt. But it's beautiful. It's always beautiful. No matter what part of the state we go to, it's gorgeous. So it's great to see you. I see some friendly faces, and I see some new faces, so it's great to see you. Janine, thank you. Where'd you go? Thank you. You've spent the day with me. I appreciate it. She's a fantastic co-chair, so thank you for that. I appreciate it very much. So I was born and raised in a small rural town in South Carolina, 2,500 people, 2 stoplights. You couldn't think about doing something wrong without somebody already telling your mom. My mom started a business out of the living room of our home. 30 plus years later, it was a successful company. I started doing the books for the family business when I was 13. It wasn't until I got to college that I realized that was child labor. But I learned the value of $1. I am not an Ivy Leaguer like the rest of the fellas. I went to a public university. I'm a graduate of Clemson University. Go Tigers. I graduated with a degree in accounting. I'm not a lawyer. I'm an accountant. Accountants are problem solvers, and that's not a slight to you lawyers. And I went on and worked in the corporate world for a while. And then I came back home to the family business. And one day I happened to be telling my mom how hard it was to make $1 and how easy it was for government to take it. And my mom said, quit complaining about it, do something about it. I had never been politically active, so I did not know you weren't supposed to run against a 30-year incumbent in a primary. Truly. Ignorance is bliss. Once I realized he was related to half the district, the only option was to win. So I went around the district and said, we've got way too many lawyers at the State House. I think they need a really good accountant. And the district took a chance on me, and we won. I went in for a few years, and I fought hard for small businesses and for taxpayers. But in South Carolina, a lot of legislation was passed by a voice vote. All in favor, say aye. All opposed, nay. The ayes have it. But one day they passed a bill that would give legislators a pay raise. All in favor, say aye. All opposed, silence. The ayes have it. Yet to this day, you can't find any legislator that says they voted themselves a pay raise. I was furious because we had a Republican House, a Republican Senate, and a Republican governor. So I filed a bill that said anything important enough to be debated on the floor of the House or the Senate is important enough for people to know how their legislators voted. And the Speaker of the House said, put the bill away. We don't need to have it. We will decide what the public needs to see and what they don't. Long story short, when I didn't put the bill away, they stripped me of everything. They stripped me of my seniority. They stripped me of my committee assignments. I could take the well. No one would hear me speak. I could sponsor a bill. No one would co-sponsor. So I ran for governor. And I'm proud to say one of the first bills we signed into law when I won was now in South Carolina, anything debated on the floor of the House or the Senate requires a legislative vote on the record. And we took it a step further and we did it on every section of the budget as well. And I love music. You were listening to my playlist earlier. I love music. And so on the day of the bill signing, we blasted throughout the State House, Pat Benatar's Hit Me With Your Best Shot. When I became governor, South Carolina was hurting. We had 11% unemployment. We had thousands of people on welfare. And South Carolina was the butt of the jokes. So we got to work. By the time I left, we were building planes with Boeing. We were building more BMWs than any place in the world. We brought in Mercedes-Benz. We brought in Volvo, 5 international tire companies. They were referring to us as the beast of the Southeast, which I still love. We announced jobs in every county in the state. We took that unemployment from 11% down to 4%. We moved thousands of people from welfare to work, and we acknowledged a truth. We said, if you've got to show picture ID to buy Sudafed, if you've got to show picture ID to get on a plane, you should have to show picture ID to protect the integrity of the election process. We passed voter ID in South Carolina. Something we could really use today, we passed one of the toughest illegal immigration laws in the country at the time. And by the time I left being governor, we were named the friendliest state in the country, the most patriotic state in the country, and the #2 state in the country people were moving to. And then I got a call for the United Nations. And my honest answer was, I don't even know what the UN does. I just know everybody hates it. I'm not wrong, right? But when you get the chance to serve your country, you jump. And so when I got to the UN, I wanted countries to know what America was for and what America was against. I didn't care if they didn't like me, but I wanted them to respect America. And we got to work. We pulled ourselves out of the Iran deal. I negotiated the largest set of sanctions against a country in a generation with North Korea. We moved the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. But the best thing that we did was we took the kick me sign off of our backs, and America was respected again at the UN. And now I'm running for president, and I don't need to tell you how bad things are. You don't have to turn on the news to see it. We are $33 trillion in debt. We're having to borrow money just to make our interest payments. China owns some of that debt. Now, I would love to tell you that Biden did that to us, and he has led us down a socialism creep that's dangerous. But I've always spoken in hard truths, and I'm going to do that with you today. Our Republicans did that to us too. You go back and you look at that $2.2 trillion COVID stimulus bill that they passed with no accountability. They expanded Medicaid, where we now have 100 million Americans on Medicaid, 42 million Americans on food stamps. That's a third of our country. Did Republicans try and fix it? They doubled down and opened up earmarks for the first time in 10 years. Special interest pet projects, pushing through 7,000 of them last December. Want to know how they spent your money? $30 million on an honors college in Vermont, $10 million to tear down a hotel in Alaska, $7.5 million on a courthouse in Colorado, and the list goes on. The 2024 appropriations budget came out. Republicans put in $7.4 billion worth of pet projects and earmarks. Democrats put in $2.8 billion. You tell me who the big spenders are now. All while 1 in 6 American families can't pay their utility bill. 60% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. 50% of American families can't afford diapers. Social Security will go bankrupt in 10 years. Medicare will go bankrupt in 8. You look at our education system, and everybody wants to blame COVID for education. We had problems with education before COVID. Pre-COVID, 67% of 8th graders in our country were not proficient in reading or math. Think about that. A couple of months ago, it came out that over 80% of our kids, 8th graders, were not proficient in history or civics. And now a couple of weeks ago, we find out our 13-year-olds are scoring the lowest they've scored in decades on reading and math. It's shameful. Then you look at the border. Don't turn on the TV. Just don't do it. I've been to the border. I know you had, bless you. I know you have the northern border as well, and that's a problem. I went to the southern border, and I didn't pull a Kamala go and come back. I went 400 miles down that border. You're not ready for what I saw. Mounds of clothes, mounds of shoes, paraphernalia, rape areas that the women and girls have to walk through. When you get up in the morning, you get your coffee and you watch the news. When these ranchers get up in the morning, they get their coffee and they go see if anybody died crossing the fence. They pick up whatever little kids were left behind and turn them over to Border Patrol. I met with multiple sheriffs. They said before 7 a.m., they try and capture as many illegal immigrants as they can, turn them over to Border Patrol. Border Patrol documents them and releases them until their court date years from now. And when I asked Border Patrol about their job, they said, you want to know what we do? We're glorified babysitters. They don't let us do our job. 5.5 million illegal immigrants have crossed that border. We had more fentanyl cross the border last year that would kill every single American. Number one cause of death for adults 18 to 45, fentanyl. And don't think for a second China doesn't know what they're doing when they send it over. You look at the news today, 10,000 crossed the border yesterday. And now Biden is going and giving temporary work visas to 500,000 of them. He's doing temporary protective status. Do you know what that means? Social security numbers, driver's license. All while you have people like my parents who put in the time, put in the price, came here the right way. My mom, we take care of my parents. They're 87 and 89. God bless them. But there is not a time we sit down for dinner where she doesn't say, are those people still crossing the border? Because they are completely offended at other people who don't follow the rules. And my mom would always say, if you don't follow the laws to get into this country, you won't follow the laws when you are in this country. And then my parents always raised us to take care of those who take care of you. I'm going to ask you for taking care of those who take care of us. Right now in America, 33,000 of our veterans are homeless. 1 in 3 suffers from PTSD or thoughts of suicide. We lose 22 heroes a day to suicide. If a veteran wants to get a doctor's appointment, they call the VA, and it takes them on average 29 days for an appointment. Why 29? Because on the 30th day, they can go to the doctor or hospital of their choice. So midway through the 29 days, they get a call to reschedule, and the clock starts all over again. We should be ashamed at how we treat our veterans. So that's a lot of bad, right? It's hard to find anything good. Any one of those issues could have been dealt with by Congress, right? But what has Congress done for you lately? Don't you think it's finally time that we have term limits in this country? Don't you think it's finally time that we have mental competency tests for anyone over the age of 75? Now, let's be clear. My mom always says I have to be ladylike, so I want to make sure I'm not being disrespectful when I say that. I don't care if you do it for 50 and up. The point is, these are people making decisions on our national security. These are people making decisions on our children's future economy. We need to know they're at the top of their game. We all know active, vibrant, sharp 75-year-olds. And then there's Joe Biden. Right now, the Senate is the most privileged nursing home in the country. So that's a lot of bad. Now I'm going to tell you what I told South Carolinians when I became governor. No more whining. No more complaining. Now we get to work. How do we fix it? When it comes to the economy, let's claw back the $500 billion of unspent COVID dollars that are out there. Instead of 87,000 IRS agents going after middle America, go after the hundreds of billions of dollars of COVID fraud that exists, one out of every $7. If 8% of our budget is interest, quit borrowing, cut up the credit cards. You have to balance a budget every day. I had to balance a budget as governor. Why is Congress the only group that refuses to balance a budget? We will stop the spending, we will stop the borrowing, we will eliminate the earmarks, and I will veto any spending bill that doesn't take us back to pre-COVID levels. That's a promise. And I don't know what's going to happen with this whole, whether it's going to shut down, whether it's not going to shut down. Tomorrow I'm going to put out an economic plan on where we're going to go further to get our country really back on track. But this is where we should be. First of all, they need to start cutting. They can't keep living like we're still in a pandemic because that's how they're spending. But secondly, they don't get to shut down government. Do your job. If they don't start bringing budgets on time, they should not get paid, period. Take their pay away. If we don't work, we don't get paid. Why should they work for just going back and forth and saying, oh, we couldn't do it, and get paid? We've got to stop that. When it comes to education, we knew in South Carolina, if a child couldn't read by 3rd grade, they were 4 times less likely to graduate high school. So in South Carolina, we started holding them back. We started doing reading remediation programs with them. We brought in their parents. We set them up for success. We need to do that all over this country. We have got to get our kids reading, or we're going to be in a world of hurt 10 years from now. No parent should ever wonder what's being said or taught to their child in the classroom. We need complete transparency in the classroom. And as parents, we have one job, and that's to make sure we do right by our kids. That's why across this country, parents should be able to decide which schools their kids go to. Every child deserves a good education, regardless of where they're born and raised. Stop mandating their schooling based on a zip code. And then let's start building things in America again. Let's put vocational classes back into our high schools. We had apprenticeships all over South Carolina where our kids learned how to build the things we were making. Let's do that across the country, and that's how we'll get them invested in the future of our economy. And then when there's the border, this has got to stop. This is a dereliction of duty that's happening right now. It's putting every American at risk. I don't know if they're waiting on another 9/11, but we can't wait on another 9/11. We have to stop this. I will take what I did in South Carolina and we'll take it national. We'll do a national E-Verify program that says that every business has to prove that who they hire is in our country legally. Secondly, we will defund sanctuary cities once and for all. Instead of those 87,000 IRS agents, we'll put 25,000 Border Patrol and ICE agents on the ground and let them do their job. We'll go back to the Remain in Mexico policy because nobody wants to remain in Mexico. And instead of catch and release, we'll go to catch and deport. That's how we'll stop the bleeding on the border. And when it comes to the cartels that are working with China to send that fentanyl over, we will send our special military ops to go and take those cartels out. If Mexico's not going to do it, we will do it. And when it comes to our veterans, you know, the media loves to show when men and women deploy and the tears that are shed, and when the celebration happens and families are reunited. It's a blessed time. I'm the wife of a combat veteran. He served in Afghanistan. When he came home, it was an amazing day. Thank you. When he came home, it was an amazing day. Everybody was celebrating. But the hard part is when you get home, because there's a transition. My husband, Michael, couldn't hear loud noises. He couldn't be in crowds. Life had passed him by for the year that he was gone, and the transition was tough. We have to help them with that transition. We can't just love our men and women when they're gone. We have to love them when they come back home, too. We will make sure that we work in that transition. We'll make sure we do telehealth so that they can get the mental health care that they need right when they need it. We will let them go to the doctor or hospital of their choice. They've earned that right. We'll make sure that they can use GI benefits for things other than education. And the way we'll deal with their health care is we'll make sure every member of Congress has to get their health care from the VA. And you watch how fast we fix that. It's going to be the best health care you've ever seen. Get excited, veterans. It's coming. It's coming. So we have the answers on the domestic side, right? Now let's talk about national security. Did you ever think we'd look at the sky and see a Chinese spy balloon going over our country? It was a national embarrassment. You've got Russia invading Ukraine. You've got Iran building a bomb. You've got North Korea testing ballistic missiles. You've got China on the march. But make no mistake, none of that would have happened had we not had that debacle in Afghanistan. The idea that my husband and his military brothers and sisters who served in Afghanistan, the idea that they had to watch us leave Bagram Air Force Base in the middle of the night without telling our allies who stood shoulder to shoulder with us for decades because we asked them to be there. Think about what that told our friends. More importantly, think about what that showed our enemies. And now we're dealing with the biggest threat we've dealt with since World War II. China has been preparing for war with us for years. And that's not me being dramatic. They're already here. They've already infiltrated. They've purchased 400,000 acres of U.S. soil, most recently near Grand Forks Air Force Base. They've bought the largest pork producer in our country. They're putting millions of dollars into universities, stealing our research and spreading Chinese propaganda. We know that they have now killed more Americans from fentanyl than the Iraq, Afghanistan, and Vietnam wars combined. We lost 75,000 Americans last year alone. We got upset with the Chinese spy balloon, right? 90% of law enforcement drones in this country are Chinese. So now think about all those many spy balloons with all of that surveillance. There's certain technology we don't want China to have because it builds up their military and it threatens America. Yet last year, the Biden administration approved 70% of those asks. And when you look at the military, China has been building, modernizing, and strengthening their military. And we better get ready. They now have the largest naval fleet in the world. They have 350 ships. They'll have 400 in 2 years. We won't even have 350 ships in 2 decades. They're doing cyber. They're doing space. They're doing artificial intelligence. They've developed hypersonic missiles. We've barely gotten started. And now they're the #1 developer of neurostrike weapons. Weapons engineered to change the mental capacity stability of military commanders and segments of the population. That's who we're dealing with. No, Joe Biden, this is not a competitor. This is an enemy. Republican and Democrat presidents for years have thought that if they were nice to China, China would want to be like us. China does not want to be like us. They want to be communist China. We've got to change the way we deal with them. So how do we deal with China? First, we stop letting them buy any of our American soil, and we take back what they've already purchased. We go to our universities and we say, you either take Chinese money or you take American money, but the days of taking both are over, and we'll get that Chinese infiltration out of our schools once and for all. To stop the fentanyl flow, we will go to China and say, we are going to end all normal trade relations with you until you stop killing Americans. You watch how fast they move, because they need America for their economy. And when it comes to that technology, don't let that be suggestive. Make it a blacklist. Quit sending the technology to China that's hurting America. It's ludicrous that we would give that to them. And when it comes to our military, don't ever forget, strong militaries don't start wars. Strong militaries prevent wars. We need to strengthen, we need to build, we need to modernize our military. But you don't just throw money at Department of Defense. You pull down that bureaucracy, pull down that red tape, get it to the men and women who need it and the equipment that's current and not archaic. We've got to do that. And for God's sake, we need to stop the gender pronoun classes that are happening in the military. It's completely demoralizing to them to have to do that. There were two things when I was at the UN that China, Russia, Iran never wanted us to have. They never wanted us to have a strong military, and they never wanted us to be energy independent. We won't just be energy independent, we will be energy dominant. We will use the resources we're blessed with. No more going hat in hand to Saudi Arabia, and no more getting dirty oil from Iran and Venezuela. And we will make sure that Ukraine wins. Yes. Now, I know there's a debate about whether we should be in Ukraine. So I want to give you a little something to think about. First of all, we had no better friend at the United Nations than Ukraine. They voted with us on everything. They were at every press conference I did, whether I asked them to be there or not. They were an amazing friend to us. They're incredibly pro-American. But the main thing we have to look at is we should always have a president that has moral clarity, that knows the difference between good and bad, that knows the difference between right and wrong, that understands that evil exists in this world. Here you had a thug invade a pro-American, freedom-loving country, and everybody just assumed that they'd be gone in 5 days, that Ukraine would be over in 5 days. And look at what they've done. Because they love their country so much, because they want their freedom so much, they have now destroyed 50% of Russia's defense. You saw Putin go ask for a bailout from Kim Jong-un in North Korea. We know he's hit rock bottom because they're getting missiles from North Korea and drones from Iran. They've raised the draft age in Russia to 65. That'll wake you up, won't it? They are now looking for fighters outside of Russia because Putin doesn't want to have to institute a draft and have the effects of his citizens come after him. But the other reason is, remember, before the Olympics, Putin and Xi held hands and named themselves unlimited partners in the eyes of the world. A couple of months ago, Russian plane shoots down a U.S. drone. President Xi goes to Russia and holds that hand again. A win for Russia is a win for China. And remember that dictators always tell you what they're going to do. They're incredibly transparent. China said they were going to take Hong Kong. They did. Russia said they were going to invade Ukraine. We watched it. China says Taiwan is next, we better believe them. Russia says after Ukraine, it's Poland and the Baltics. If that happens, those are NATO countries, and then we are at war. We are trying to prevent war. America has given, I don't think you should ever give straight up cash to a country. I don't think we should put troops on the ground. But I think we need to work with our allies to give them the equipment and the ammunition to win. When we do that, what we've done so far, because everybody wants to throw out numbers, the amount of support America has given Ukraine, 3.5% of our entire defense budget. As a percentage of GDP, 11 European countries have done more than us. That's a small price to pay to prevent war. But more than that, if Ukraine wins, it sends the biggest message to China, not to touch Taiwan, because China's watching every ounce of this war. And you know who the biggest supporters are of us and the Westerners helping Ukraine? The Taiwanese. Because the Taiwanese know if Ukraine wins, then they will be left alone. A win for Russia is a win for China. That's why we care. So we have the solutions to get us back on track. The one thing we need to overcome first is this national self-loathing that has taken over our country. The idea that they say America's bad or rotten or racist. I was elected the first female minority governor in history. America's not racist, we're blessed. Our kids need to know to love America. They need to be saying the Pledge of Allegiance when they start school every day. Two months ago, I dropped my husband Michael off at 4 a.m. for another year-long deployment. I watched him and 230 soldiers pick up their 2 duffel bags of belongings to go to a country they'd never been, all in the name of protecting America. They're willing to sacrifice their lives and their families because they still believe in this amazing experiment that is America. So if they're willing to fight for us there, shouldn't we be willing to fight for America here? Because we have a country to save. But in order to do that, we've got to acknowledge some hard truths. Republicans have lost the last 7 out of 8 popular votes for president. That is nothing to be proud of. We should want to win the majority of Americans. But to do that, we're going to have to elect a new generational leader. Leave the past behind and let's go forward with new solutions. And we can do that. But it's going to take a lot of courage. Courage from everyone here and those sitting in the chairs over there. Courage for me to run. And courage for every one of you to remember. Don't complain about what happens in a general election if you don't play in this primary, because it matters. Someone asked me why I was running when I first launched my campaign. And I said, you know, my parents came here 50 years ago. Go Tigers. I love that. My parents came here 50 years ago to an America that was strong and proud and full of opportunities. I want them to know that country again. I'm doing this for my husband, Michael, and his military brothers and sisters. They need to know their sacrifice matters, that we do love our country. I'm doing this for my daughter who just got married, and I saw how hard it was for her and her husband to buy a home. And I'm doing this for my son who's a senior in college, and I am tired of watching him write papers of things he doesn't believe in just to get an A. That is not us. That is not America. And for the first time, 78% of Americans don't think their kids are going to live as good of a life as we did. We can't be okay with that. I'm not okay with that. We have a country to save. But if you will join me in this fight, if you will work with me, I promise you that our best days are still to come. Thank you very much. God bless you. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. So with that enthusiasm, you were so kind to listen to me. So now we're going to turn the tables on you. We will open it up for questions. There is nothing I won't answer. You may not like my answer, but there's nothing I won't answer. I think Miles and Andrew have microphones. If you just raise your hand, they will find you, and we will start.
Oh, thank you. Well, welcome to New Hampshire, first of all.
Thank you. It's great to be back.
You have great things to say about many topics, and I appreciate that. But when it comes down to it, first of all, there's so many things that we're all concerned about. What would be your first thing you would do if you were elected coming into the office?
It's a great question. So I'll tell you, don't just listen to what I say, look at what I did. So when I became governor of South Carolina, the first thing I did was replace the head of every agency. Whether they were good or not, I replaced them because we needed to freshen it up and clean it out. The second thing I did was I sent teams into those agencies to clean them up, pull down regulations, get rid of old programs, get rid of problem children. And then we set them up to start doing benchmark results for the taxpayers every 90 days. So taxpayers could see a return on investment for every one of those agencies. We fine-tuned their mission. We reminded them they were not supposed to be all things to all people, and we made sure that they started proving it to the taxpayers. I saw that they were spending all this money because they knew if they didn't spend it, they wouldn't get the same amount the next year. So we called my own agencies out, and we put all of their spending online. And we then started incentivizing them to give money back to the taxpayers. And they started to compete on who could become the most effective and most efficient. Those are things that if you do it, you set the tone of what your administration is going to be. Because when you deal with a legislative branch or Congress that doesn't want to do, they can't say anything when you just cleaned up all the agencies that they deal with. It sets the tone for them to stop the spending. It sets the tone to help get rid of all of those old regs, and it sets the tone to clean house. In some of those agencies, we tweaked them. In some agencies, we had to gut them, many layers down. We're going to have to do that in D.C. I mean, think of the Department of Justice, think of our intelligence agencies, think of education. All of those are going to have to be done. But the one thing we will do, presidents typically meet with governors once a year. I will meet with our governors once a quarter, Republican and Democrat, with the goal of moving those federal programs down to the states. When you do that, you reduce the size of the federal government, but you empower the people in the states. So think benefits, think healthcare, think education, think all of those things. That's what you can do, and we will suggest to the states how best to do it. So let me give you a couple of examples of what we did in South Carolina that I'd love to have the rest of the states do. I told you we had thousands of people on welfare. What I did was I took those people on welfare, and I went to our businesses. And I said, if you will take this person and train them, I will pay for them for X number of weeks. That was the time they would have been sitting on the couch. And I said, at the end of it, you decide if you want to hire them. We moved 35,000 people from welfare to work. A lot of times people don't know how to connect the dots. Those people wanted jobs, they didn't know how to get them. They needed training, they didn't know how to do it. Businesses needed workers and couldn't find them. It was a little bit harder, but think about what we did. And we had celebrations for those families because in a lot of cases, we broke that generational cycle of being dependent on a government. And all of a sudden they saw value in themselves, and their children saw value in their parents. And then I was obsessed with the prison system, against my security detail's wishes. I went into prisons, maximum security, men's prisons, women's prisons. I wanted to understand how people got in, what we did with them when they were in, and what we did when they got out. And we reformed the entire prison system. We taught them how to do computer classes. We taught them how to build a resume. We did family planning for them. We gave them faith-based classes if they wanted. And we put equipment behind the fence, and we started teaching them a skill. Now in South Carolina, when an inmate leaves the fence, they've got a job to go to the next day. We have the lowest recidivism rate in the country. So think about when you lift up the least of these and show them that they have value. Think about the magic that happens. What if we did that all over our country? That's what I'm talking about. And it's best handled in the states. The federal government never could have done what I did, but the states can. And when you think about me saying I want vocational classes in South Carolina would be very different than vocational classes in New Hampshire. Y'all should be deciding that, not DC. So when we move those functions down, it makes a big difference. The other thing that you have to remember is tone at the top. Second example, when I was at the UN this time, first week I was there, I was drinking from a fire hydrant, trying to figure out what was going on. And someone who worked for me that I didn't know at the US mission, the United Nations, which lets you know, yes, there is a deep state, got on the phone with the press and told them what my agenda was. None of it was my agenda. So I told my team, I said, find out who that is, and I want them fired. You're not going to guess who it was. It was John Kerry's sister. You can't make it up, I promise. She worked at the U.S. mission of the United Nations for me, and I said, I want you to get her. I want her fired. And they said, you can't. She's here for 6 more months. And I said, you take her key pass, you take her computer, I will pay her to sit home for 6 months. And we did. We never had another problem in U.S. mission for the United Nations because we showed them what we were willing to do. We set the tone at the top. We let them know there was no politics that was going to happen in what we were doing, that if you did anything like that, there was a price to pay. You've got to be willing to make examples of people. You've got to be willing to let heads roll if something goes wrong. So that's what I would do the first day. Long answer to you.
Madam Ambassador, first of all, thank you for your service, and secondly, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
And for caring about this. My question is more an existential, spiritual, internal question than anything to do with either finances or international threats. You've brilliantly defined the ruthless totalitarian risk that China poses, though I think their economy is becoming more vulnerable than you realize. But my greatest concern, even greater a threat than China, is the extent to which the cultural elite left and their very long, decades-long march through our cultural institutions have managed, to exactly as you said, teach our children that our own country is unworthy, irretrievably oppressive, and irredeemably evil. And as one very astute young political commentator said a year or two ago, no country whose elite is teaching its children that their own country is unworthy and contemptible can long survive. The second success that the left has achieved by their long march has been the intentional division, the identity group division between races in this country, and it's getting worse and more dangerous. What can you do to stem the tide of the left's, for now, triumph in the cultural march, and to unite Americans again? United, this country will still be strong, even though we're not educating our children very well. And can you, in the service of that, can you defy the ironic coalition of Marxist and communist loving left elitist with the billionaire globalist oligarch class like Larry Fink and the BlackRocks and the Vanguards, and in the face of their resistance, bring manufacturing back to this country and get black and white and Hispanic Americans?
So I think that, the bottom line is, how do you bring people together? How do we stop the elite? And how do we get America working again? The first thing, transparency cures all things. So the Larry Finks in the world and all of those things, when you start to make what everyone is doing transparent, then you really start to get to the root of the issue. We do have to get the elitists out of our education system. We've seen what they've done. They started in our universities, and then those kids graduated from the universities and they started teaching in our K through 12 schools. We didn't get there overnight. We're not going to fix it overnight. But the first way to solve a problem is to get that you have a problem. And we know we have one, and we've got to go clean it up, one step at a time. That's the first thing. When it comes to bringing people together, I could again tell you lots of things that would sound good, but I'll give you an example of what was probably the toughest time in my life. I don't know if y'all remember, but we had the horrific shooting at Mother Emanuel Church in Charleston, South Carolina. It was the first time we had had a shooting in a place of worship in this country. And you had 12 people who did what so many South Carolinians do on a Wednesday night. They went to Bible study. But on that night, someone else showed up. He didn't look like them. He didn't act like them. He didn't sound like them. They didn't call the cops. They didn't throw him out. Instead, they pulled up a chair and they prayed with him for an hour. And when they bowed their heads in that last prayer, he began to shoot. These were people like Ethel Lance, whose daughter had died 2 years prior to breast cancer, and she had a broken heart. But she would go around Mother Emanuel Church, cleaning it up, singing, "One day at a time, sweet Jesus. That's all I ask of you. Give me the strength to do every day what I have to do." Our youngest victims, Tywanza Sanders, had the whole world in front of him. He had just graduated college. And on that night, he stood in front of his 87-year-old great Aunt Susie and looked at the killer and said, "We mean no harm to you. You don't have to do this." Or it was people like Cynthia Hurd, whose life motto was simply to be kinder than necessary. That's who these people were. And South Carolina fell to her knees. The national media came into the state. They wanted to talk about racism. They wanted to talk about gun control. They wanted to talk about death penalty, all of these things. I was trying to wrap my arms around South Carolina. This was on the heels of Ferguson, where they saw violence and fires and everything else. It was on the TV every day. And I pushed the national media back and I said, there will be a time and place where we can answer those questions, but right now we have 9 bodies to bury, and we need to give them that respect. I didn't have the luxury of that time because the killer's manifesto came out, and he was draped in the Confederate flag and spewed hate. The Confederate flag is a very personal issue in South Carolina. It has very distinct dividing lines. Half of South Carolinians see the Confederate flag as heritage and service. The other half of South Carolinians saw it as slavery and hate. My job wasn't to judge either side. My job was to get them to see the best of themselves and go forward. And so what we did was, after that manifesto came out, the Confederate flag stood flying right in front of our State House. I called a meeting and I told my staff, I said, I want 4 meetings on Monday. Don't tell any of them why I'm asking them to meet, because I knew they wouldn't show up. I asked to meet with the Republican leadership, the Democrat leadership, the congressional delegation, and our community leaders. And when they came into my office, I said, I'm going to call for the flag to come down at 3 o'clock today. And if you will stand with me, I will forever be grateful. And if you won't, I won't tell anyone you were ever in this room. And I have kept my word to that. At 3 o'clock, I had my husband with me because I thought he was going to be the only one standing with me at that press conference. But we had so many people, men, women, black, white, Republican, Democrat. That was the easy part. The hard part was it took 2/3 vote in both the House and the Senate, which is an impossible feat. The Senate, they passed it quickly because the pastor of the church was a state senator. And I will forever be haunted because I called him the night of the killing. And I said, Senator, I am so sorry about what happened. I will be there first thing in the morning. Anything any of the families need, I will be there. And it haunts me to this day because he wasn't in session like he was supposed to be. He was in that Bible study. And the fact that the phone was ringing in his pocket after he had been shot just haunts me. But the Senate, that was their brother. So they passed it very quickly because one of their own had passed. Then it got to the House. The House was very divided. I was getting 10,000 emails a day from people screaming or praising one way or the other. It was incredibly divided. All the national media had come in. And the Speaker of the House came to me and said, I can't do it. I can't do it. And I said, go and get it done. Flag's got to come down. He comes back to me and he goes, okay, flag's coming down, but they want a different version of it. I'm like, no different version, no flag. Goes back, a few days later, comes back and says, we've got it. Flag is coming down. This can be over. I said, that's great. He said, they have one small exception. And I said, what is it? And he said, they just want to leave the flagpole up. If you can survive South Carolina politics, you can survive anything. So I knew that if the flagpole stayed up, that when the media left, another flag was going to go back up. And I didn't want any other governor dealing with that. And I said, no flag, no flagpole. And he said, but Governor, you could declare a win. Everybody would see that you brought it down. And I said, but no, another governor would have to deal with this, and I'm not going to do it. He said, I can't do it. He said, I can't convince him. And I said, okay, then I'm coming to talk to him. Now, keep in mind, this is the same group that blackballed me, right? When I tried to get them to vote on the record. So I was not overly loved by this group because I had kind of forced transparency on them when they didn't want it. And I went to them and I said, you know what? I want to tell you a story. I said, when I was little, my dad would drive to the big city and sometimes take me with him. And I loved it. And my dad always loved buying produce from farmer stands. He liked buying them straight from the farmer. And one day we stopped at this produce stand, and he started getting his produce. And I saw the two owners by the cash register look alarmed. They picked up the phone, and the next thing I knew, 2 police cars drove up. My father wears a turban. The officers sat by the register. My father continued to get his produce. He took it to the register. He thanked them. He paid, and he got back in the car. And he didn't speak to me the whole way home. He was hoping I didn't see what just happened. I knew exactly what had happened. I told that Republican caucus that day, I said, every time I go to get on the plane, the governor's plane, I pass that produce stand. And every time I pass it, I feel pain. I said, don't make a child ride past our state house and see that flag and feel pain. Get rid of the flag, get rid of the flagpole. At 1 a.m. that morning, they got rid of the flag and they got rid of the flagpole. I say that because when you have issues that cause great division, you don't go and pick a side. That's not what a leader does. Respect each side and show them a better way forward. We took the flag down and put it in a museum. If anybody wanted to fly it on their private property, they had the freedom to do it. But it no longer was a representative, living, breathing symbol at our State House. We've got a lot of healing to do as a country. We don't have to pick sides that divide us further. We just have to show a better way forward because people genuinely are good. But if you go and you raise the rhetoric, what's going to happen? They're just going to hate each other more. If you go and you calm it down and get them to see a bigger picture, they all want to be a part of that. We're going to do that in this country. We're going to bring people together. We have to do that for the sake of our kids, and I am determined to do it.
Hi, Governor Haley. My name is Healy, by the way, so we're probably related.
Oh, we might be sisters.
Thank you so much for coming to New Hampshire.
Thank you.
And I've always been very impressed with how you were as an ambassador, and
Thank
et cetera. Anyway, my concern is the military, and one of the reasons is because I'm a Gold Star mother. And when was your husband in Afghanistan?
2013.
Okay, so he knew about Dan's mission. It was called Operation Red Wings. And one of the things about that particular mission and why it went so wrong was that the communication things that they had were out of date. And they couldn't reach back to the base in time to get people to come and help them in time. And so how would we handle getting them more current equipment and technical things?
Well, first I will tell you, we stand on your son's shoulders because he was the best of us. God bless him and God bless your family. We won't forget. This is when I say we have to have a strong military. I went and visited Sig Sauer here, right? In New Hampshire. And I got to shoot some guns, which I like to do. But they showed me the first handgun that they were going to give to our military in decades. That's an example of everything. Everything's old. Everything, the equipment's out of date, the weapons are out of date, the ammunition's out of date. And think about when our men and women, these things are heavy. They can make them lighter now. They can make them smarter now. They can make them better assist and support. But do you know where all the money's going? To the bureaucrats. It's not going down to the men and women. That's what I want to change. When I say take down the red tape, take down the bureaucracy, quit playing favorites with companies, because that's happening too. The only thing we should care about is making sure our men and women have exactly what they need to do to defend America. Period. Hands down. Rules of engagement on when we go to war. First of all, as the wife of I don't ever want to go to war. I don't ever want to. Our number one job is make sure we never have to send our men and women to war. I don't want to send my husband. I don't want to hear of any stories like your son. We have to do everything but that. But that's why you have to get in front of situations. That's why you have to get in front of it with Ukraine. That's why you have to get in front of it with China. That's why we have to make sure we don't let Iran get a bomb. Is because we don't want that to happen. I can promise you that we're going to do everything we can to show strength. And because we're going to show that strength, we're going to do everything possible to avoid ever sending our men and women in harm's way.
And we have time for one more question.
Oh, make it a good one.
Well, Ambassador, thank you, as others have thank you for being here tonight. And I will say I am an attorney, so I'm not sure brevity is my gift.
I love you too, I promise.
But I will try to make it brief. So I work at a biotech company here in New England, and I've been concerned, like many people, that a lot of our pharmaceutical ingredients are made abroad. What do you plan to do to incentivize companies and technology to come back to America?
So the first thing, it's a great question. The first thing we need to do on day one is make sure that we do whatever we need to protect America. So when we're looking at China, the first thing I'm going to say is, what do we have to do what's a threat, a national security threat from China? Let's go back to the terrible days of COVID. They all told you to wear a mask. It was made in China. They told you to take a COVID test. If you turned it over, it was made in China. If you go down the aisle of your drugstore, they're all made in China. That's not good, because if the rug's pulled out from under us tomorrow, we're all in trouble. But this is how ridiculous it is. There is a company called U.S. Antibiotics in Bristol, Tennessee, and they make amoxicillin. You parents know with ear infections, amoxicillin. Our federal government provides all of the amoxicillin from China. They don't take any from Bristol. Think about that. Here you have an American company who, if you gave them that business, they could make a lot more. But instead, you're shunning them and getting it from China? That's the mentality we have to have. That, to me, those are national security issues. The first thing we do is we try and make it America. When we can't make it in America, we don't wait to make it in America, but let's go to our friends. India, South Korea, Japan, Australia, Israel, all of the countries that we don't have to worry about are a threat. If we have to get it from them until we can make it here, we'll do that. But getting anything that's going to cause a problem with America, we've got to stop. The Europeans thought, oh, we buy so much from Russia, they'll never do anything to us. We can't be that naive. China will absolutely do whatever they need to us. So let's be smart about it. We're going to start making those in America. We're going to start getting them from our allies. We will stop doing business with any countries that hate America. That's a promise. So I will leave you with this. Y'all have been so nice with your time, and I appreciate it. So I'll leave you with this. When I ran against that longest-serving legislator in a primary, people laughed at me. And I got to work, and I earned their support, and we won. When I ran for governor, I actually ran against a lieutenant governor, an attorney general, a very popular congressman, and a state senator. I was Nikki who. I had 3% in the polls. I had the least amount of money. But I worked South Carolina like no one else, and we won. When I got to the United Nations, they all said I didn't have enough experience. And I got to work and took the kick me sign off of our backs. I have been underestimated in everything I've ever done. And it's a blessing because it makes me scrappy. No one will outwork me in this race. No one will outsmart me in this race because we have a country to save. So what I will tell you is, if you like what I had to say today, go tell 10 people. Tell them to go to NikkiHaley.com. Tell them to volunteer. Tell them to invest $5, $10, $25. Tell them to join this fight for saving our country. If you don't like what I've had to say today, just don't say anything and don't tell anyone you were here. God bless you. Thank you so much.